Good evening. Good evening. It's truly a privilege to join you all once again. Thanks so much for tuning in to Leadership Conversations. I am your host, Colin McDermott. I am the founder of Keen Vision Leadership, and just want to take the time out to thank everybody that's on here that take the time out of their busy Monday to tune in to our leadership conversations. I always look forward to having these conversations. I look forward to Mondays. It's the start of a new week, and so it's always good to get it to start it off with leadership, set the tone for the rest of your week. And I appreciate it that you take the time out to tune in to what I have to say and what I have to share, and hopefully it gives you some kind of help to help to start your week off in a better way. Helps to set the tone for your week. Ultimately, my desire is to help you develop the leadership goals, help you to recognize various ways that you can improve on your leadership abilities and improve on your leadership skills, and be able to work on it each week. Each week we should be working towards improving ourselves, work on getting better at what we do, at who we are, improving our character, improving our skills. All of these things are important. It's the Mamba mentality that you got to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. And so I'm hoping that these lessons, these conversations, these discussions that we're having will help equip you with the tools that you need to be able to make the necessary steps to improve, so that tomorrow you become a better person than you are today. So God bless you all. Thank you for tuning in. Sister Annette, thank you for tuning in. Sister Susan, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of the love and the support. And I'm excited about your future. I'm excited about what is taking place. My wife and I, we were having a conversation about the fact that we're in the 8th month of the year. This is the 8th month, and there's such a feeling and such an impression that it's the time of new beginnings. 8 being the number of new beginnings, and so I believe that there's a new beginning out there for you. I believe that God is establishing some new things for you, and that God is causing you to step into he's giving you new vision, he's giving you new sight, and he's causing you to step into some new things that you haven't been able to step into before. And so I'm excited because I have a feeling and I have a sensing that great things are coming. It's been a rough year and a half, right, with everything that's been taking place with COVID and things like that. But I truly believe that we're in a time where the doors that seem to have been shut are now opening up, and that there are things that is going to become available to each and every one of us as long as we continue to stay steadfast in what we're doing. And so I'm excited because I truly feel in my heart that we're stepping into a new beginning. We're in the second day of the 8th month. And so I believe that the desires that you have, that God is making them available to you and opening the doors and giving you the necessary connections. So like I said, thank you so much for tuning in. Feel free to tag somebody that needs to hear this. Tag someone who needs to learn or who needs the tips to develop in their leadership styles and principles. Ultimately, our job is to learn about the various styles, be able to define it, and then be able to adapt and adjust, right? It's about sharpening our tools, sharpening the abilities and the tools that we have in our shed, that's in our tool belt, and being able to use those so that we can be able to ultimately accomplish our destiny and our purpose, right? It's not just about having things that sound theories that sound nice, but it's about applying it to your life so that you can be able to really walk in the call that you have been given and be able to step into who you were created to be, to step into your purpose. I believe that we all have a purpose. And so feel free to tag somebody, like, share, comment. I love I love the interactive aspect of this conversation, to be able to get your feedback in real time and to get your comments. So feel free to like, share, and comment, and let's get into this. So for those of you that were part of it last week, we talked about abrasive leadership. And we talked about those type of leaders that are very strong, that are very controlling, that are pretty much domineering types of leaders, right? And the turn-ons to that and how it affects those that they lead. And then the week before that, we talked about insecure leadership. And so today I want to talk about the topic or the idea of stubborn leadership or inflexible leadership. I want to talk about stubborn and inflexible leadership styles, because one of the things that we have to be mindful of and be careful to avoid is the idea of being inflexible, not being flexible to adapt and to adjust to change, right? One thing that I always preach and I always teach is that leadership is about continuous growth. It's about continuous growth and vision building. And so if you're a leader, you should always be growing. You should always be maturing. You should always be moving forward, right? And when a leader is inflexible, when they refuse to adapt and they refuse to adjust to change, they fall into a place of stagnation. And you never want to be in a place where you become stagnant. You never want to be in a place where you're not moving forward. See, the thing is that movement is life, right? We hear that oftentimes, that movement is life. And it's important that we always put ourselves in a position of movement. Whatever vision you have, it doesn't stop until it doesn't stop until you, not even until you pass. It should never stop. It should be left for someone else to continue. And so when you're a leader who is flexible, you accomplish goals and then you move on to the next goal, right? But inflexible leaders, they accomplish one goal and they stay there. Now, inflexible leaders, right? They're usually closed-minded, right? They don't like change. They don't like when things are changing. They don't want to adapt. Even by definition, inflexibility is an unwillingness to change. It's a rigidly firm will or purpose. It's the unwillingness to change or alter course. Now, we live in 2021, right? And in this time, as you see, technology is always advancing. Things are always changing. Things that you see in 2021, you didn't see them back in 2000. You didn't see those things in 1999. You didn't see those things in 1998. Things are always changing. Yes, that's right. And then one is a one-track mind. You're singular focused, and you refuse to adapt. And so when a leader is inflexible, they are unable to keep up with the change. It's not even an inability. It's ultimately a refusal. Like, you refuse to change. You refuse to adjust. You refuse to adapt. You refuse to veer away from the direction that you're going, even when it's a dead end. Right? Even when it's a dead end, you're just so focused on doing things a set way, and you see those examples in people who are always focused on the rules, focused on tradition, focused on how things are done. When I think about an inflexible leader or a stubborn leader, I label them as, this is how we do it here. Those kind of people, that this is how we do it here. These are the rules. These are the policies. These are the procedures. This is how things are done. And we don't veer away from how things are done. We follow the tradition. We follow the tradition. This is how it was done before us. This is how it's done now, and this is how it will always be done. And so they become closed-minded. They're closed-minded to innovation. They're closed-minded to change. They're closed-minded to growing and maturing. And so every leader, it's an important quality and an important characteristic of every leader is that you should be able to adapt. You should be able to adjust. You have to learn to be flexible. Now, flexibility by definition is flexibility allows you to move effectively without breaking. You see, we're now in the Summer Olympics, and you see the gymnasts, right? You see the routines that they do, and you see that they're very flexible in what they're doing. What makes them special is that their flexibility doesn't allow them to break, right? They're able to adjust their body. They're able to control their range of motion, right? Regardless of where they are, and they're able to do it with control, with stability, and be able to effectively carry out their routines. Right? You see the floor, whether it's floor gymnastics or they're on the balance beam, or they're on the what's the other beam that they're on where they do the flips, right? It requires a level of flexibility for them to be able to carry out the routines. They're able to adapt to sudden change. They're able to control their momentum. They're able to adjust, right? You see the gymnasts, when they make a mistake, they're able to adjust on the fly. That's what flexibility is all about. And leaders should always be flexible, because one thing that is always consistent, what I always say this, is that the one thing that never changes is the fact that everything changes. Right? There is no time, there is no situation where change is not necessary, where change doesn't happen. Change is inevitable. And no matter how you try to fight it, no matter how you try to avoid it, change is always consistent. With technology, with personalities, with mindsets, with thoughts, change is always going to occur. And so as a leader, you have to be able to adapt to change. You have to be able to adapt to sudden movements. You have to be able to adjust, whether it's your business, whether it's your ministry, adjust and adapt so that you can be more efficient and more effective. Now, when you look at the past, and you look at companies and organizations who refuse to be flexible, who refuse to change, right? You find that they no longer exist. I was watching the documentary on Netflix, how ironic, on Netflix, about the death of Blockbuster. And one of the biggest problems that caused Blockbuster's failure is their inability to change, their inability to adapt. Because their leadership team wasn't willing to adapt and adjust, it put them in a situation where they're bankrupt and ultimately became extinct. I come to find out that there's only one Blockbuster store left in all of the United States. Only one. And for those of us who are old enough to remember Blockbuster was the place. Blockbuster was the spot. You go there, you rent your movies, you get your popcorn, you get your candy. In those days, as a kid, I loved going to Blockbuster. I loved being able to see what movies were available, being able to pick out. It was a whole experience, Blockbuster, in its popular and heyday. But because of the fact that it was unable to adjust, because it was unable to adapt to the changing technologies and the changing times, it now became extinct. Some other companies, right? What are some other companies that we know of that refuse to adapt and refuse to be flexible and refuse to adjust? How many of us used to have a Nokia phone, right? We used to have a Nokia phone, or some of us who used to have a BlackBerry. Now in 2021, those things that used to be popular, you don't see them anymore. I can't remember the last time I saw a BlackBerry phone. I can't remember the last time I saw a Nokia phone. And back in the day, Nokia phones were sturdy. Like, those things could fall on the ground and they wouldn't break, they wouldn't dent, there would be no issues with them. But because of the fact that these companies refuse to be flexible, because of their leadership being stubborn and refusing to adapt to change, now you no longer see them. They went from being a popular thing to being extinct. You see these things everywhere you go. That when organizations refuse to be flexible, they refuse to change, they don't grow, and they ultimately become stagnant, and some of them become extinct. For those of us who are in ministry, right? You see those churches who has had the same number of members for the last 20, 30 years. Why? Because they refuse to adapt, they refuse to adjust, they refuse to change, and as a result, they stay in one place. There's no spiritual growth. There is no growth in the membership. There is no growth at all. It's just stuck in one place. And so, as leaders, we have to learn to be flexible. We have to learn to be able to adapt and to adjust. And so when you're working with an inflexible leader, when you're working with a stubborn leader, it puts you in a position where you're in danger of extinction. It puts you in a position where you become stagnant and there's no growth. There's no maturing. There's no development. And you never want to be in a position or in a place where you're not growing or developing, right? Because in all that we're doing, there has to be growth. The body, from the day you're born until the day you die, it's growing, it's changing, it's adapting, right? You're not the same person now that you were 10 years ago. You're not the same person now that you were when you were 5, right? So all the body is created to adapt and to grow and to be flexible to change. So inflexible leaders, stubborn leaders, they get stuck in tradition. They get stuck in following the rules. They get stuck in how things are done, right? And when you are in those positions, it makes it hard to change. Now, flexibility is important, because when you talk about flexibility, it's the ability to change direction without changing the mission. It causes you to change the strategy, to change your approach, to adapt new technologies, without changing the purpose, without changing the mission. So when I'm talking about being adaptable, I'm not talking about, oh, you have this idea, you have this vision, you have this goal, you have this ministry that you've been working on, and now because things are changing, you have to change the purpose. No, a flexible leader can be able to change a direction without changing purpose. For those of us who have GPS systems in our cars, right? Sometimes you'll be taking a road and there'll be traffic, and the GPS will say rerouting or adjusting, or this way will get you to your destination faster. And in those moments, you have to make a decision. Do I follow the new direction that it's giving me? It's still getting me to the same point, to the same place, to the same destination. But do I adjust and change the direction that is change to the direction that's leading me to, or do I stay stuck in traffic? And too many people, they stay stuck in traffic. They stay stuck even though the road is a dead end, even though there's traffic, even though there's an obstruction in the road. They refuse to make an adjustment to get to their destination. And so now you become delayed. Now you become put at a standstill because of your inability to flex, your inability to adapt. And so as leaders, we have to learn to be flexible. Now, when you're working with an inflexible leader, when you're working with a stubborn leader, right? We have to understand that stubbornness, inflexibility, those kind of things are rooted in fear. There is that fear of change. There's that fear of losing stability, I want us to understand that there's a fear of losing stability, losing control. And majority of people, right? Majority of us like when things are stable. We don't like change. We don't like things to be changed too often. We want to feel safe. We want to feel secure. We want to feel stable. And so when you talk about rules, traditions, policies, all of these things are put in place to create order and stability. Rules and traditions and policies are put into place to create stability. But it's what fuels it that makes it either effective or ineffective. Because traditions, rules, and policies, when they are open, they create a guide. They serve as a guide to help you accomplish a goal. But when it's driven by innovation, right, and it's fueled by creativity and fueled by growth, you can reach a goal and a milestone, and you can start adding to it so that you can accomplish a new goal. But when it's fueled by fear, right, when policies and procedures are fueled by fear and tradition is fueled by fear, it becomes a prisoner. It becomes a prison, and you become stuck in a moment. Think about all of the traditions that we like to keep, right? It usually is a reminder of the glory days. It's usually a reminder of when things were, how things were. I remember in my day when this used to when this happened. And oftentimes you see it a lot in older folks, right? Some older folks, they get to an age where they just don't want to change, they don't want to adapt. And what do you hear them say? They often talk about, I remember when. I remember those times when I was in my 30s or when I was in my 20s. And they become stuck in a moment in time where things were at its peak. And so when you fall into that position of becoming inflexible, of becoming stubborn, you get stuck in a moment in time. Because that was what worked in that time where things were quote unquote the best, right? When it becomes, it's a sign of when things were at its peak for you. But if we're going to be leaders that are going to be bringing about change and innovation, then every step that we take moving forward should be an open door for new experiences. But like I said, there is a general fear of losing stability. There is a genuine fear of losing security. No one wants to feel like they're not secure, like things are not secure. That's why we get easily adjusted to routines, right? I get up at this time, I brush my teeth, I have my coffee, I get dressed, I walk to the train station, I get on the same train in the same car, and I get off to the same stop to the same job, right? You get off the same stop, you'll stop at the same bagel place or the same Dunkin' Donuts or the same Starbucks every day, and then you go from there to your job where you sit and you have the same routine. You get on your computer, you sit, you log into your computer, you log into your email, you check all your emails, you start sending emails, you start checking spreadsheets. You go through your day, you work from 9 to 5, then you leave, you get back on the same train, going back, and it's the same routine over and over, right? Because we are conditioned to routine, because routines are safe, routines are secure, routines are stable. And so anything that changes that, right? Prime example, how many times have you gone to work? Right? According to your normal routine, you've gone to work and you're going to work at the same time as you always, the train or the bus comes at the same time all the time. But this one day, the train is late or the train is delayed or the bus is delayed, right? Now you start to feel panicky, you start to get upset, you start to become agitated because it's a disruption in your routine. It's a disruption in your routine, and now you become frustrated because things are not going according to plan. It challenges the stability, right? I remember in the days when I used to work in the city. I used to take the same bus to the same train, and I would take the Metro North. I know that the Metro North leaves at 7:05, and it gets me to my destination by 7:45, and I know that it's a 15-minute walk from there to my job, right? And when you get there, you're expecting the train to come at 7:05, but you hear over the announcement speaker that the train has been delayed. Now I'm upset. I'm frustrated because if the train comes at 7:10, then I'm not going to get there till 7:50, 7:55, and then I'm get to work late. And so now, even while waiting for this train to come, I'm frustrated. And it throws my whole day off because it disrupts my stability. So when we talk about inflexible leaders, a lot of times it's rooted in that fear. It's rooted in that fear of losing stability, of sudden change. And so they follow these rules and these strict ways of life to keep their rules intact so that it keeps them stable. So what are some signs of an inflexible leader? What are some signs of an inflexible leader? One of the signs of an inflexible leader is that they reject new ideas. They're not open to any new ideas. They're not open to any feedback or ideas that'll bring improvement. Right? Because of the fact that they refuse to accept change, right? They tend to believe that their way is right. Right? They believe that the rules and the traditions are always right. Right? You ever work in a company where there's someone who follows the rules? It's like the rules become the law and it's always right. It's always right. And anything that deviates from that, anything that deviates from the rules is perceived as a personal attack. So because of that, because they take it personal as a personal attack against them, they refuse and reject new ideas. So anything that'll bring make things smoother, that'll make a process more understandable, more makes it easier to adjust and to function, they refuse it because it goes against the quote unquote policies and procedures. And we've all been there. We've all been there when working with a leader who is inflexible, who's not willing to adapt, and they become so strict that they don't even want to hear anything new. They immediately shut off. Well, this is what the rules are, and this is what we have to do. So anything that seems like an improvement, they immediately reject it. Because again, it violates their idea of stability, and it feeds that fear of change. And so when you have a leader that's like that, it stifles creativity and it stifles innovation. It puts the rest of the team in a position where they have to keep their ideas to themselves. They aren't allowed to be effective and be creative in their personal responsibility or task on the team, and it becomes demotivating. You lose motivation because nobody wants to work in an environment, nobody wants to be a part of a team that doesn't allow you to do what you do, right? No one wants to be in an environment where they have to be a mindless drone, where you get your assignment, you get your task, and you have to do it this way, this step by step, this way, according to the rules, according to how things are done here. Nobody wants to feel like a mindless drone. Nobody wants to feel stifled. Nobody wants to feel like they aren't able to be creative, because then they just become They just work on autopilot, and they don't put as much effort, they don't put as much energy into into their particular task. You find those things even in ministry and in churches, right? When there's a leader that's in charge that's strictly and rigidly following the rules and the traditions of how things are done here, you find that the members, they kind of do things on autopilot. There's no energy, there's no effort, there is no creativity. It's just I could do this thing with my eyes closed. And so, yes, I'll show up, I'll do my part, and then I'll go home, because now my passion is not in it. I'm not passionate about it. I'm not excited about it. So I have no energy in producing anything. Because anytime I try to step out and do anything creative, I get pushed back into this box. We've seen this throughout the years, right? Throughout the years of people being bound by tradition to an organization, to a ministry, to a church. They're bound by tradition, and you feel rejected when you try to come up with a new idea. And so ultimately, you stop caring. Come on, let's talk about it. You stop caring. You're not into it. You're just there. You just go through the motions. You just do what you got to do, and you go home. There's no passion there. There's no fire. There's no drive. There's no energy. There's no anything, because of the fact that you're stuck and confined to a box of an outdated system. That's what happens when you're working with an inflexible leader. The rest of the team is affected. Their performance becomes damaged. Their motivation declines. There's no passion. There's no energy, and there ultimately is no momentum. There's no momentum or productivity, because of the fact that we're stuck in this box. That you're stuck in traditions that was put into place 20 years ago by people who's not even there anymore. And so there's no room for interpretation. And those in leaders that operate that way just create a toxic environment. Another sign of an inflexible leader is that they're strict enforcers of the rules. They're strict enforcers of the rules. And so they'll punish you for not doing things according to tradition. They'll punish you for trying to do things outside of the box. And those people who try to operate outside of the box, they get rejected, they get ostracized, they get treated like outcasts. They get punished because of the fact that they are, quote unquote, violating the rules. My wife and I, we've been watching this show called The Chosen, and I highly recommend each and every person that's on here to watch that show, because it's so powerful and it's so effective, and it's such an awesome experience to watch. And it's about the ministry of Jesus, but it takes a different approach. It gives more of a relational aspect of Jesus than what we tend to read, right? And in there was a gentleman who was a priest, and he had an issue with what Jesus was preaching, and he took issue to it, and he was having a conversation with another priest, and the priest was telling him, why would we limit God to just the law that we follow, right? And the gentleman responded. He said, we have laws in place. We have the rules in place, and the law is God. And so that particular part stuck out to me, because a lot of inflexible leaders, they have that kind of mindset where the rules, the traditions, the policies that are in place, it is God. It is supreme. It is always right. It is what is in place to keep things in order. It keeps everything in line. And when you step out of that, then you become a heretic. You become a rogue. individual. You become you violate the system. And you see these things even in our jobs, right? And one thing that I've come to realize is that upper management, right? And I'm trying to cover all aspects of leadership, because you see these things in ministry and you see these things in the workplace. And so I'm giving you both so that we can recognize and understand these signs, right? Because you'll see those in upper management or in higher positions, they'll appoint managers who are these inflexible leaders, right? They'll appoint those leaders who don't deviate from the system, who don't rock the boat, who don't do anything outside of the policies that are set. And you see those things that they get promoted into these management roles, right? They're the assistant directors, they're the store managers, they're the team leaders, they're the deacons, they're the ministry leaders, right? They get promoted into these positions not because of the fact that they are good with people, but because they're able to they're enforcers of the rules. And it's not good because it allows people to feel controlled and micromanaged. And now you create this chasm, you create this toxic environment where it's us against them. But oftentimes the upper management will put those people in place to keep the rest of the team under control. They'll put them in place to keep them in line, right? Keep them in line. And we see those things, right? Everywhere we go, we see those things. You have that one manager that is always calling you into meetings, that's always trying to have conversations, that are always it's starting to trigger a lot of memories of having these one-on-ones. Because I used to have one-on-ones with my managers, and even though I was good at my job, they would constantly have these broad conversations about the rules and how things are done and the policies. And so there was no room for creativity. There was no room for improvement. There was no room to make processes more efficient. It was, they gotta enforce the rules. They gotta remind you of the rules. They gotta keep you in line so that you do things according to how those in upper management have set. And you see that in churches where these people get appointed as ministry leaders to keep the rest of the members in line and following the tradition. And ultimately, like I said, it creates a toxic environment, and it creates low morale, where you just don't want to do anything. You just don't want to be a part because you don't feel the freedom to be you. And I truly believe flexible leaders are able to give people tasks and allow them to do their thing, right? As long as you give someone a task and you give them the deadline, I need this done by this date or this time, and you let them do it their way, you'll find that sometimes they'll overproduce, and they'll get it done before the deadline. Why? Because they have that freedom. They have that autonomy to do what they do, how they do it. They recognize that you respect their skills and abilities. And that's what a flexible leader does. They trust and respect that if you're on my team, if we're working together, that you're going to be able to get the job done. So I respect you in your capacity. I respect you in your role, and I believe that you can be able to get it done and do it well. But an inflexible leader doesn't care about that. They don't care about the people. They don't care about how you feel. They don't care about your thoughts. All they care about is, are you following the rules? Are you following the policy? Are you following the tradition? And with that, another sign is that they lack empathy, right? They care more about the rules than they care about the people. And so what did I say? They reject new ideas. They're strict enforcers, and the third thing that they lack empathy. They'll develop relationships with you. They'll connect with you, but once they feel that the rules are being broken or being violated, then they step back because the rules are more important. The rules are more important than our relationship. And so they have this mindset of rules over relationship. It's if they have to make a choice. If they have to make a choice, they're going to always choose the rules, and they don't care about how it's going to affect you. And so you never want to be that kind of leader that doesn't know how to manage people and work with people, and you don't want to create an environment where you're distant and there's a disconnect because of the fact that you lack empathy. There's a possibility. There are ways to be able to follow the rules but still care for people, right? There's a thing in leadership where a chart where it talks about leadership styles, and maybe one day I'll bring it up and do a teaching on that. But it's a spectrum. There's process and then there's people. And so where do you fall on that spectrum? Is the process more important, or are the people more important? A truly flexible leader, right? A truly flexible leader is able to properly and effectively ride the spectrum to be able to get maximum performance. So they have the ability to maneuver the processes while encouraging, empowering, and building the people that's on their team. And so that's the kind of leader that we ultimately should work towards becoming, right? Being able to navigate the process and the procedures and still get the people to follow you and believe in the vision and grow. But in inflexible leaders, the processes become more important than the people. And so now you create a system of instability, and you create a system that people become dry and they become impassionate. And so you don't want to be that person that lacks empathy, because ultimately how people feel will affect how they perform. And when they know that you care about them, they will go above and beyond to produce and to perform. So those are some of the things that we have to recognize that when it comes to an inflexible leader. And again, the examples that I brought up before, Blockbuster, Nokia, BlackBerry, all of these organizations failed because of their inability to flex, their inability to adapt. And because they cared more about the way things were done, and because of the fact that they refused to adapt and adjust their leadership styles so that they can be competitive in those markets. They were that's right, BlackBerry. When was the last time you seen BlackBerry? When was the last time you seen a Nokia phone? And so those are the things that I was sharing earlier, in that because of those organizations refusing to adapt and to adjust, because they were so stuck in their rules and their traditions. And I was reading something that was saying that Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix, and they refused to buy it because they didn't believe that Netflix would be able to sustain in that industry. The same thing with Kodak, because of the fact that they refused to adjust and adapt to the digital photography movement. Because of that, it caused them to become ultimately extinct. And leaders who are inflexible become stagnant. They become stuck in the moment of time, and they become extinct. And you never want to be in that position. Now, how do you work with an inflexible leader? Now, let's take it from two tiers. If you're an inflexible leader, then all of these signs you have to constantly work on. You have to be intentional on changing your approach, changing your ideas, changing your beliefs so that you can be able to be a more effective leader. So we got to learn to be flexible. We have to learn to be open to creativity. And the whole idea of being inflexible is rooted in fear. It's rooted in that fear of losing stability. And so we got to learn, if you're a leader who struggles with being inflexible, you have to become okay with change. You have to be okay with things feeling unstable, even though it may not necessarily be. It's all a game of perception, right? It's a game of perception. You perceive that things are out of control, but when you think about it, it's really in control. It's just how you feel in the moment. And so as an inflexible leader, you have to learn to accept change. You have to learn to let go of the fear of change. You have to learn to let go of the fear of instability, and be more open-minded to creative ideas and innovations. And so if you are a leader who struggles with being inflexible, you struggle with being stubborn, right? You got to learn to kind of dress back, surround yourself around people who are creative, who are helpful, who think outside of the box, and start to learn to adjust and adapt to those ideas and to those people. You got to be able to lean on those for support to help you adapt and help you to adjust to that. So that's if you are an inflexible leader. And a lot of times we struggle with these things and don't even realize it because we've never been on a forum that allows for vulnerability. We're never in a forum or in a place that lets us know that this needs to change without making us feel bad about it, right? Because a lot of times things that we need to change, we don't change because whoever communicated it to us made us feel guilty about it. But we should never feel guilty about growth. We should never feel condemned or rejected because of the need to grow. And I want to make that clear that we have to always be open. We have to always be willing to grow and to mature. Maturity is all about learning from mistakes. It's all about growing from situation to situation. And so a lot of times we get challenged by people who create this threatening environment, who try to force us to change without actually giving us the tools that we need to change. And so we always got to be working on those things. And so if you're an inflexible leader, I hope that this was able to spark a light bulb in your mind and make the necessary steps to adjust. It's a process. It takes time, but you have people that are believing in your growth and believing in maturity, and it's now about taking those steps to make the change. And that's for all of the leadership styles that I've been discussing. If you struggle with being abrasive, if you struggle with being insecure, you struggle with being inflexible, take the necessary steps. Be intentional about your growth. Be intentional about your change. Be intentional about how you can become a better and more effective leader. One thing that I'm learning day by day is that there's always a better way. There's always a better way. And when you keep that mindset that there's always a better way, then you have the opportunity to grow. So that's for those who battle and struggle with inflexible leadership. Now, when you're working with an inflexible leader, it's more work. And we don't like to work sometimes. We don't like to help people grow. Sometimes we just want people to get it. We just want people to change. We want people to do things differently. And a lot of times it requires us doing our part, us putting energy into it to help someone to change, to help someone to grow. And so One of the things that we should do if we're working with an inflexible leader is try to establish a form of communication that's non-threatening. Because one thing about someone who is stubborn, someone who's inflexible, is that the moment that they feel threatened, they immediately close up, their defenses go up, and now you can't reach them. Come on, we all know those stubborn people who the moment they feel challenged or they feel threatened, they become more combative and they don't want to hear what you have to say. So it's about creating a form of communication that's non-threatening. It's about being able to create a connection that pierces through their defenses. And so you got to establish a communication system that's respectful, that's considerate, that's open, that allows room for dialogue, that allows room for discussion. And when you create that environment, then those people can be able to help to it creates an environment for them to feel comfortable and be more open-minded. So thank you for that question. I'm gonna answer it in a second. How do flexible leaders deal with employees that are inflexible? I think it goes the same way. It goes the same way for leaders leading inflexible people and inflexible people working with inflexible leaders. But I'm gonna go more in depth into answering that question. So thank you so much for it. And that's for anybody who has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. Let's talk about it. Let's address it. Let's deal with it, because ultimately this is a forum for us to discuss the various leadership challenges that we face. And so if you're dealing with an inflexible leader, you almost have to manage up. And so you got to be able to create that environment of communication that's non-threatening. Your tone has to be non-confrontational. And even though you may be in a conversation or in a discussion that becomes frustrating, you got to learn to keep yourself under control, keep your emotions under control. Because ultimately, you don't want to release your frustration or have a tone that seems confrontational, because then now it becomes a battle, and now everyone's defenses are up and you get nowhere, right? And the same thing with a flexible leader working with an inflexible employee. How do you create that connection? It's important that we as leaders be able to create a connection with those that we lead. So how do I create a connection? How do I create a safe environment where I can communicate with that individual who's on my team and show them a better way? And a lot of times as a leader, it's more challenging to do that. It's more challenging as the leader leading someone else than it is as an employee working with a leader. And so ultimately it's the same strategies, but it requires more work, Pastor Letitia, to be able to work with an employee who's that way. Another thing that you have to do as working with an inflexible leader, or even working with an inflexible employee. So, I mean, thank you for that, because now it expands the conversation. Another thing that you have to do is you have to present ideas as a benefit. So there's an idea when you're leading change, right? You have to ultimately create a sense of urgency, but you also have to outline the change as a benefit to the organization and to the individual. Because remember, an inflexible leader is usually guided by the rules, and they're focused more on the rules. So now, how do I present my ideas? How do I communicate my idea of change as not a challenge to the policy and the procedures and the rules and the traditions, but how do I present it as an extension? We have to ultimately present it as a benefit. Listen, these rules are in place and they're in place for a purpose, right? Rules are in place to create order, to create stability. And so you have to learn to present the ideas as a benefit to the tradition, a benefit to the rules. This is not to change anything that we've been doing, but this is just a small tweak that we can do that will benefit everyone in the company. So yes, we have a policy and procedure on how we do this, but ultimately these ideas helps us to adapt a new system that will make it more efficient, but not change what's in place, but make it more efficient. So we got to learn to kind of present the ideas as a benefit to all parties involved. As leaders, we have to learn to create win-win situations. It's a win for me, it's a win for you. When you create these win-win situations, you find that change is more easily accepted. And it's more easily received because it's non-threatening. It's non-threatening. It doesn't change or make things feel unstable. And one thing that I said earlier about flexible leaders is that they're able to maintain control. They're able to maintain flexibility. They're able to maintain stability while being able to adapt to sudden change. And so ultimately these kind of things help to present things. One thing that I back to my example of Jesus, right, is that one thing that he said that was so powerful is the fact that he said to them, he said, I didn't come to change the law. I just came to fulfill it, right? All the stuff that they asked him about regarding the law and the traditions that they normally followed, he didn't say anything that was contrary to those laws. He didn't say anything that was contrary to their traditions. What he said was, everything that he said was an extension of the law, bringing clarity to it, bringing a better understanding to it, and ultimately showing how to apply it in a more effective way. So these are some of the things that we have to do. And it takes work. It's not easy. It takes patience. It takes temperance. It takes gentleness. It takes all of these things to be able to help it, because it's not going to be a one-time thing. It's not going to be, I've done this way, and it's going to be that always. These leaders have to learn to adapt and change from their normal routine. So those are some of the things. The last thing I want to share is that you have to show an appreciation for their commitment, right? There's a saying that you catch more bees with honey than with vinegar. Sometimes you have to show appreciation. You have to recognize, and you have to compliment, right? You have to compliment their commitment, because ultimately, when you really look at it, it comes from a good place, right? Someone who enforces the rules, who follows the rules, they recognize that where it comes from, right? They recognize that it's something that's in place, and they're committed to it. They're committed to carrying out these rules and these policies and these traditions, because that's what got them to this point. That's what got the organization to this point. And it's a level of commitment, but the problem is that it's guided by fear. So you have to kind of recognize and appreciate. Listen, I appreciate that you uphold and you enforce and you carry out and you execute these things, because ultimately it comes from with good intentions, but it's just executed poorly. And when you show that appreciation and you show that recognition to their commitment to the organization, then ultimately you create that open space where they can feel comfortable and they don't feel threatened. Because it's the threatening aspect, that feeling of being threatened, that causes them to kind of move out of place and causes them to become more and to want to enforce it even greater. So these are just some of the things that I wanted to share tonight about a stubborn, inflexible leadership. It's important that we recognize and understand that these things have to be adjusted. We have to learn to be more flexible so that we can keep moving, because movement is life. We have to constantly be growing. We have to constantly be maturing. We have to always be teachable. We have to always be able to learn. And so you never want to become in a place where you become inflexible, because when you become inflexible, you become a fossil. I read something that was so powerful in that Google, they have the fossil of a T-Rex on their campus. And it's because it serves as a reminder that you have to constantly be growing. You have to constantly be innovating, because if you don't, you can be extinct just like the dinosaurs. And so God created us with this ability to always be creative. You know, one thing that we talked about over the weekend is that we're created with this natural ability to be creative. And so rather than trying to fit everything into a box, our nature should be to find ways to expand the box, right? We got to learn to expand the box, because when you expand the box, you create more room for innovation. And it's a vital part of our DNA to create. It's a vital part of our character to create, because our introduction to God is the first introduction to God is that He's the creator. That's how we are first introduced to who God is, because it's in His DNA. And if we are creating this image, we are created with the same DNA of creativity. That's why our cells are constantly reproducing, right? It's always expanding. Our bones are always expanding. That's why we reproduce and we produce children, right? That's why we're constantly building, we're constantly expanding, we're constantly getting new ideas, because it's in our DNA. It's in our nature to be creative. And so we have to get out of the idea of staying in the box, but how do I expand the box? How do I make the box bigger so that no one feels ostracized for being outside of the box? These are some of the responsibilities that we have as leaders, because when you think outside of the box, it creates a room for people to reject you, and creates room for people to ostracize you. But when you expand the box and you expand what was done, now you create a whole new environment. One thing about the settlers, right? When they tried to discover new land, it wasn't about changing anything that was done before. It was about discovering new land and be able to claim it and become an extension of whatever country they were from. So when English settlers would go out, or explorers or Spanish explorers would go out, and I know I'm going into history, but I'm just trying to make a point in that when they go out to explore, it was to find and discover new land that they can claim as an extension of whatever country they were a part of. So it's in our DNA to be creative and to expand and to grow. And in order to be able to do that, we got to be able to flex. We got to be able to adapt. And so I hope that this was able to help. How can we as leaders on a day-to-day basis grow, learn, become more flexible? Because when you become more flexible, you're able to absorb shock, right? Something that I learned about exercise is that you develop the ability to absorb shock. So nothing becomes a shocking to you. Nothing, sudden movements, sudden changes don't even hurt as it would someone who is not flexible. And so I encourage you that this week, take the time out to figure out how can you be more flexible? How can you be more adaptable? How can you be more agile as a leader? And when you learn to develop those things and you learn to build on that, you put yourself in a position where you're continuously innovating, you're continuously growing, you're continuously creating. And so that's my challenge for you this week. Figure out, take the time to explore and to think and to to question and to figure out and discover. It's about self-discovery. And so thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I appreciate all of your comments. I appreciate you being a part of this. Like I said, I look forward to having these conversations because it helps me as much as I hope it helps you. And so I hope that this week will be a great week for you. As I said in my opening, that we're in the 8th month, and I feel that there's a release of new beginnings, and there are new opportunities that are opening up in this 8th month. I don't know what it is about this particular time, but it seems to be the general consensus that for those of us who are sensitive, there's something in the atmosphere there's a release for change. There's a release for new beginnings and for new opportunities. And so I hope that this week would be a week of new opportunities, of new relationships, of new connections. And I pray that you will succeed in all that you endeavor to do. And so thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you all. I look forward to continuing these discussions, and I'll see you next week. All right. God bless.